Hi, John.
Hello. Thank
Bonnie.
you so much for
Hi.
doing
Ellen.
this.
So nice to see you. I'm here to talk with you about your new film, In Waves and War. And I'm coming to you just as a veteran film curator and producer and executive, now a funder of documentaries, and really excited to talk with you about this new project.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
I don't know if we're supposed to introduce ourselves, but my
I
name is
think
John
it would
Shenk.
be great if you would. Yeah.
My name is John Shenk. I directed this film along with my filmmaking partner and life partner, Bonni Cohen. This was really, as you can imagine, a very special and very intense project.
Mhm.
I think we started talking to Diane Wireman, a participant, about this in 2019. So it's been quite a journey with
Yeah.
these
Yeah,
guys.
I was gonna, so this is a really, really different kind of a departure for you guys in a way to go into this kind of to make a film in a way about this internal journey as much as an external journey. And to sort of like challenge yourselves to go inside of kind of whether it's spiritual, whether it's medicinal kind of experience of three unlikely characters. And this journey with the three Navy SEALs who are trying to liberate from crippling and terrifying trauma, PTSD, depression. Um,
It's interesting that you say that because
yeah.
we have obviously we've made a number of films in the kind of trauma space, for lack of a better,
Yes, it's true. Athlete A,
Audrey and Daisy, but
Audrey and Daisy. Right.
there was very often a the films kind of concentrated on the systems,
Yes,
the
exactly.
organizations, and the kind of whether it was a legal system that was trying to help, and
Or a social media kind of
right,
ecosystem
right.
that hurts people. You're right. That's what I meant about sort of these infrastructures, these external
That's
systems.
right. So we're very
Yeah,
used to being in that external space,
yeah,
almost like with the eye of a journalist.
exactly.
Um, and so, yes, you're right. This was extremely challenging, not only to go internally, but having to visualize the internal processes.
Exactly.
So,
And
I think it was John would probably agree. It's the hardest film we've ever tackled.
Well,
that's
it stretched us,
yeah.
artistically. We had to figure out a way to put exactly what you said, Caroline. They had very intense, very story-based experiences from this Ibogaine experience. We had to figure out a way to put that on screen because it's such an important piece of it of their journey.
Let's go back to the beginning. Of sort of the project, which began in 2019. How did it first come to your attention?
The late great Diane Wireman, who we really miss dearly, who passed away, during the making of this film, was working a participant, and she met Marcus and Amber. She was introduced to Marcus and Amber. Marcus had 2 years prior to meeting Diane had experienced this psychedelic medicine after years of just really intense trauma. You know, there's a suicide epidemic going on in the military that's just off the charts, and just
And let's stop there for a minute. The statistics are staggering. So like the need for this film and the kind of I understand the desire to sort of bring this story to light because there have been 31,000 suicides, correct?
It's probably higher than that by
It's
now.
probably by now higher since 9/11, right? There have been 31,000 ex-military suicides, people coming home. The other statistic is around 7,000 um, casualties from combat. So 7,000 casualties from combat, 31,000 suicides. Okay. I just want
Oh
people to
yeah.
know that.
No, I'm glad you did that. In the context of that emergency, the families of these veterans are very scared, and they don't know where to turn. Anyways, long story short, Marcus did this treatment. It was kind of a miracle for him in turning him around, and they wanted to shout it to the world. Part of that was their willingness to be included in a documentary. And Diane, God bless her, she thought of us I think because we had done some
Trauma,
trauma type
trauma experts.
trauma experts, yeah.
Fortunately, yeah.
The joke was I said we listened to her for a while and I said, so you want me to introduce my wife to these super hunky, vulnerable guys and spend a lot of time with them because you see Marcus for the first time and he's just this big, handsome guy and he's talking about his feelings and just so appealing. And that's how it began. It was we were super excited to get into it. And of course it was immediately very challenging to continue to get the rest of the access that we needed.
Well, the truth is you can't really access the Navy SEAL world. I
No.
mean, the willingness, well, to call it willingness is maybe even a little bit of a stretch. Marcus and Amber felt so committed to making this film and getting the word out because they had had this experience where their family really was saved. Marcus was saved, the family was saved. And that's not to say it's doesn't need work, but yes, there was this thing they wanted to share with the world and mostly with their brothers as kind of like this, new mission they were on. And it's the hardest community in the world to penetrate because they basically take an oath of secrecy, which is the definition of being a Navy SEAL in many ways. So trying to get access to that community only was possible with their entree to the world. And we worked really closely with them to, find the right people that they were connected to. We became kind of, obsessed with the main characters in the film, having relationships with each other. And
Yeah, yeah,
this kind of battlefield mission that Navy SEALs are on was now transferring to a life mission, a different kind of mission now that they were home. And that could be pictured through the relationships that they had with each other. But it took a very long time to gain that trust and find that the right kind of cast of characters.
absolutely. Will you just say a little bit about Navy SEALs for folks who, or maybe they're watching this before they've seen the film or
Yeah.
after, but that sort of clarification around what is a Navy SEAL and why, is the trauma more heightened for Navy SEALs potentially because of the depth and intensity of that work?
Well, Navy SEALs are the special forces kind of elite fighting group within the United States Navy. There's, I think, something like 5 or 6 thousand Navy SEALs in current day. That was vastly ramped up when the global war on terror began after 9/11. The Navy SEALs really started as a specialized group, way back mid-century, 20th century, to do missions every once in a while that required a high degree of training and a high degree of preparation for single missions. But under the Bush Jr. administration, it kind of evolved into a more day-to-day fighting force where they were doing night after night. You see in the film the characters
Yes,
described in the film 300 missions a year, away from home, just night after night, these kind of capture kill missions that they did in Afghanistan and then in Iraq as well.
right.
And because of that, because that war was largely perpetrated by special forces, the Navy SEALs really bore the brunt of a lot of the really kind of frontline battles that happened.
And the relentlessness of it, the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
no end war.
Because historically, special forces weren't deployed at that kind of rate.
Yes, yes. So I see. So then the trauma is kind of
Yes,
is it collateral to that
yes,
level of
totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyways, these guys, after many years of doing that, they were kind of beaten down in a way that I think it's fair to say that few other American military veterans have been, just because of the amount of combat they saw.
I see. And the film so beautifully sets up that juxtaposition of kind of these like elite height, fighters who can face the relentless battle every day and horror, a kind of horror every day. And then this way in which they come back and they need to heal. And there's this like internal and vulnerable place that they need to go to. And that juxtaposition of warrior, fighter, and vulnerable, delicateness, is beautiful in the film, the way that the tension between those two realities really plays out. And
It's so interesting that you bring that up because a lot of what we wrestled with in the telling of this story, and particularly in the edit room,
Mhm,
was that balance.
mhm.
Because you have to spend
Yeah.
X amount of minutes getting to know these guys in order for that vulnerability that you point out to even read or translate or be
Kind of
felt.
be felt exactly for us
Be
to
felt.
talk it, for us to
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
what kind of sacrifice that is for them.
Right. And what is that balance? Where exactly does it tip over and start to become a war film, or where
Right.
does it tip over and start to become a therapy film or a rehabilitation film? And we wanted it to just be a human film
Mhm.
and get that balance exactly right, so that you really know these guys, you know their families before
Yeah.
you head it, and you sort of you build them up and then you break them down and
Yes.
get a point where you're actually ready for them to be rehabilitated. That was the hardest work of the film, honestly.
This conversation may be heard by our many, many colleagues who think about this stuff all day long. That's just such an interesting narrative structural challenge,
Yeah,
is to find that balance and to design us a kind of narrative structure that fits the truth of who they are.
exactly.
And I think I really saw that in the film, and we all love thinking about those things, right? Narrative
Yes.
Yeah,
structure.
it
Yeah.
was absolutely a structural challenge. I mean, of course, almost every film is, but
Yeah.
um, like Bonnie was saying, we've all seen a million war films.
Yeah.
We haven't seen these particular guys go through the journey of becoming kind of punished physically and mentally by the wars. So we had to do that. Bonnie and I usually like just to kind of start our films and not necessarily do cold opens and teases and
Yeah.
stuff. But with this film, we really felt like we had to do something like that because we knew we had a lot of story to get through before we could get back to the medicine piece.
Right.
And
Right.
so the
We wanted
film,
to introduce the medicine first, and
yeah,
To
this large
foreshadow what's coming.
and
yeah,
this larger container of the scientific community, which is where you
yeah.
begin looking at this problem.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we had that amazing gift of that Stanford study that we
Yeah.
discovered was going on during the making of our film, and so we had these kind of almost like a Greek chorus of guys who echoed what our central characters were going through, and we could use that archival video as kind of teasing material to just to give the audience a sense of what is coming down the pike, and that was a real breakthrough. Once we figured out we could kind of tease it, and then kind of start the real story of the film.
And then come back to it at, like, I think in this third act at some point, and then at the end,
Mhm.
if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I think these we're all such nerds, but I love it's like taking your resource. What sources do you have available to you to tell a story that is in many ways elusive, in many ways tricky, and bring them together and choose to place them in a particular order with a particular pace and a particular frame, and unlock further meaning.
There's like a lot of pressure, I think. It's so interesting that I'm so happy we're having this particular part of this conversation, because there's particular pressure, I think, on documentary film to do everything. So like
Yes,
often in Q&As for any of our films, and you've had this
right.
experience,
It's all
Carolyn, where
content. It's
you
all the
go in, it's like, well, what about this and what about that? And why didn't you pull on this thread or that thread?
oh, I see.
As opposed to thinking about a narrative film where there's a script and there's a particular place where you focus in,
Yes,
characters develop, and there's a narrative heft that goes from point A to point B to point C. And
yeah,
you're not tasked with having to tell every piece of the sort of parameters of the story, Whereas
yeah,
a documentary, because there's a journalistic necessity
yes,
and ethic around telling a story. So
yeah,
we wrestled with that a lot because, there are two sides to this story in a way in the larger context of the world. There's the people of Afghanistan and Iraq. There's the larger U.S. military. There's,
yes,
the
Policy.
places where there's the policy piece. There's the places where these
right,
medicines actually, the origins of this medicine and the people
right,
that discover them and have used them traditionally. There are all of these threads that could be pulled, but
sure,
we
yeah,
have found that for us, the most success we can find in character development and human emotional development in a film is to really discipline ourselves to stay true to what we've set out to do, which is, these three guys,
yes,
their community, their experience.
Right. You make those rules for yourself so that you can go deeper with that character, with that emotion
That's right. That's right.
journey, you know. And it's, yeah, you have to choose and you have to stick with it. But I really hear you that there are so many other stories within this world that you've opened up to us. Now, a great documentary, which this is, elicits those further questions. And that's all we can do.
Yeah, hopefully it elicits the questions and you can
Yeah.
have those conversations and there's not an
Right.
expectation that it's on screen.
Exactly, exactly. So let's talk about the sort of those sources at your disposal that you kind of assembled, you know, to tell this. So you had the war story in the beginning. So you had the Stanford tapes of this Stanford experiment. I thought that was interesting that, you know, these classical Stanford experiments we
Mhm.
all know and
That's
love.
true. Yeah, it is kind of
It has
another.
echoes.
We
Oh,
worked with
fantastic.
Stanford. They wanted to video those for scientific purposes, and we worked with them to so that we could have a record for ourselves as well.
That's such a happy,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was very cool. Of course, they were doing what is called an observational study. They weren't giving the guys the medicine. So this is often the first step to studying a new, a new behavior or a new medicine or whatever. They were doing this battery of tests before they went down to Mexico, and then when they came back, and a month later, and 6 months later, and a year later, to put together their really as much as they could observe was happening both inside the brain, behaviorally, their symptoms of PTSD and that kind of thing, and obviously wanted to have a record of that. So we were able to work with them, which was really super fortunate for the film, as I said earlier, about the kind of the
super
screen.
good timing. My gosh, lucky.
Yeah.
Will you tell me a little bit about both the war side of the story and the healing side of the story? What sources did you have at your disposal to tell that story visually?
I mean, one thing that might be, I can give you a really interesting example on the war side, because
Mhm.
obviously these are um, secret operations for the most part. And
Yeah.
but it was long enough that some things had been declassified.
Okay.
We were able to through not even through DJ, but through another source, get our hands on the audio from the helicopter of that sort of there's a seminal battle that DJ
Yeah.
and Maddie participate in.
Wow.
Uh, and DJ is on the ground and he's in comms with the helicopter pilots because they need a rescue. And so we were able to work with that audio and a sort of a mapping of that he provided for us of sort of what was going on the ground from an aerial perspective. And then we could work with that and then take that to the animators and talk about how to construct the scene from the specifically from the perspective of DJ and Maddie. And so
Yeah.
we tried wherever possible to kind of construct around a an actual archival element, whether it be audio, photograph,
Yeah.
or when possible, a piece of video material. Um, and so it's kind of a form of recreation, I suppose, but it's a form of documentary recreation that sort
Mhm.
of still lives in memory and lives in the abstract. When you see the film, you'll see that the battle scenes are sort of constructed. The animation of the battle scenes are very impressionistic. They sort of,
Yeah.
it's almost like that ethereal thing that you feel in dreams where you can't quite capture a
Yeah.
photographic realism around an image, but
Right.
you're in it and it's evoking, the kind of sketchy outsides of what might be in your memory.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that you didn't sort of make a boundary in terms of animation. We're only going to use animation for the let's call them journeys, the journeying with the ibogaine and the toad, the drugs, let's say, or the
Yeah.
medicine, let's say, that you used that plentifully there as the men narrated their experiences there, but you also used it in the battle in the war part of the film to make a kind of tacit link between the two worlds, you know, that it all is a kind of surreal
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, Caroline. We just to say it, there's two different types of animation in the film.
Okay, yeah, please, yeah.
There's a battle, there's sort of a battle recreation type of thing, which Bonnie
Mhm.
was describing, and then there's these kind of psychedelic experiences that we bring to life. The
Yeah,
battle the battle kind of recreations, I hate that word, but
I know. Let's not use it.
the battle animations are this beautiful charcoal kind of dreamy
Yeah.
stuff that this company, AKA Studios in London, created. Um, and they're totally based on as much information as we could glean from visual representations and photographs and some grainy aerial video and stuff. And yeah, you're exactly right. We wanted to kind of show that those memories are they're like these ethereal things that are almost impossible to grab a hold of, and in a way kind of stand in contrast to the psychedelic animation, which is kind of hyper vivid and
It's really crisp. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, really crisp. But
Yeah.
Ibogaine, we kept hearing early on, as soon as we asked people about what is this drug, almost everybody who's taken it says something to the effect that it's like a waking dream. It's like a life review. You're able to go back in time and vividly smell and taste and feel and see memories from your past, but with this amazing perspective kind of as well. And
Observational perspective as opposed to
yeah,
captivity within
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. And so
Mhm.
we as soon as we heard that, we were like, well, we have to figure out a way to put that on the screen. We have to bring that to life, and it's because it was such an important piece of their, insight, their psychological insight.
Part of what makes the journey so vivid are those documentary elements that we use to bring them to life. Like,
Yeah.
we actually did 360-degree imaging of the guys themselves. So you see them, that's actually them that are in the animated
Wow.
scenes. But there's
Wow.
also a lot of their archival photographs that, and there's some audio exchanges between DJ and his father. There's,
Yeah.
we tried where possible to kind of, you
Yeah.
really much like a waking dream, you have these real elements that are then exaggerated or distorted or whatever. But we
Yeah.
we tried particularly in Marcus's case where he describes seeing, a deck of cards of images of his life come by. We actually literally do that in the
Mhm.
animation. You
Yeah.
can you have access to like all this photo journey of his life.
Speaking of subjectivity, I was kind of blown away by the three men's abilities to narrate their experience and tell us such a captivating story, each of them. Like when they're describing, certainly when they're just, going back into war and telling us what happened, when they kind of in that intermediary period where they're all kind of narrating what happened to them when they got back and what was the dynamics in their families. But then, especially when they narrate their medicine journeys, and that I imagine because they were such good storytellers, you had great animation because it was so vivid, like the cards, or
Well,
when DJ talks about his father and the lawnmower, that's a really vivid story. And the animation it's terrifying, and it's powerful. Yeah.
I think that we also, well, just to respond to two things there.
That wasn't really a question, sorry.
No, but we talked to a lot of guys. There are many incredible stories that did
Yeah.
not end up on the screen that were equally as vivid and equally, but there were some really common themes that ended up emerging, which was that these guys, they thought, a lot of them expected that they were going to get into the medicine and start this journey and they were going to revisit the battlefield. They had very specific,
Yeah.
they thought, intentions about going to, I lost a friend at this point, I want to go see that friend, or
Right. Right.
I had this traumatic experience where I came up against a whole family in a village in Afghan, I want to go back there.
Yeah.
And what they discovered was that even with those intentions, the medicine was guiding them often somewhere else,
Yeah.
somewhere earlier,
Yes. Yes.
someplace that they needed to go in order to understand something really deep about themselves and even to shed light on what happened to them later on the battlefield. So these
And I
kind of
think,
childhood experiences, whether, DJ with his father or memories that Marcus had of his own father or
yeah.
what might have happened to Maddie that he didn't want to face.
Yes.
That was this isn't a perfect science, but classically, majoritively, those were the kinds of stories we were hearing.
I have so many more questions, of course, about like now, like looking outward about, do you want to say anything about like, kind of the film in the world and audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it. We've been with audiences in theaters, at festivals, and then We just were in Los Angeles at a theatrical opening of the film, and it's it's always really interesting to us to see the effects that it has on people who really didn't think that they had any hope left, and that this is a path for them. Not necessarily ibogaine specifically, but some kind of intervention, some kind of potentially psychedelic intervention, which are quite popular now, obviously. But this. It's just been very interesting to see. Yes, the vet community, first responder community, survivors of natural disaster, survivors of childhood trauma, just those of us living in the world today, which is just a reasonably traumatic experience. It's been a very moving moment for us to see how the film resonates with folks and gives them hope because that's all we have right now. You know, we're doing a lot of work with the veteran community. We're giving a lot of access to the film. Obviously, the film will be available more widely on
Oh,
November
is it
3rd
November 3rd on Netflix?
on Netflix. But we are going to continue to do these big screenings. We're doing a big outreach on Mental Health Awareness Day.
Oh,
We're
cool.
working with folks in Washington to get, with the VA communities.
Wow.
So there's just a huge push to have communities come together around the film so that they can have active conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah, so all that good work is happening.
Have you seen an expansion of this treatment since you began working on the film in 2019? Like, have more vets taken it up or adopted it? Or yeah,
Unfortunately, as you see in the film, these medicines aren't really legal in the United States,
yeah,
and there's not anything approaching what would be kind of the appropriate support and therapy that goes along with the taking of these medicines that would be required to really
yeah.
make it sustainable for, the number of people that really could use it. But yes, Marcus and Amber have an organization called Vets. It's a nonprofit that actually raises money to send guys down to Mexico and provide therapy support for them as they do that before and after. And I think the number is something like 1,000 or maybe more of veterans have gone down just in their program. Of course, there's other programs.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's quite the word is out among the veterans that this stuff exists, that it works, that people have gotten relief, and the film is trying to plug into to that kind of megaphone of shouting out what these medicines can do at an individual level for families and veterans. We showed the film to the Texas State Legislature. Former Governor Rick Perry introduced the film. He sounded like Timothy Leary on stage talking about how this medicine is going to change the
Wow.
world. Um, and indeed, after the film showed down there, the bill suddenly had, I don't know, 2 dozen more sponsors, and eventually passed the legislature down there to put a bunch of
Wow.
money into ibogaine research.
Okay.
So
Wow.
we're trying to do stuff like that. We love our films to be, we endeavor to make great films that are emotional experiences for audiences, but it's so nice when they can also take part in kind of activism that's going on around publicizing the issue that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, very exciting that it's going to be so widely available too on Netflix.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you so much
thoughtful. I
for
mean, you
this great
are
conversation.
you should really, I don't know, write a book, have a series. You're such an amazing film studies professor and intellect about documentary film. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Well,
Always.
you guys are up to the task, so thank you.